The U.S. is in the midst of a real systemic crisis. The U.S.'s most famous Apache attack helicopter has begun to go down regularly. The old helicopter is starting to fail, and there is no new one. Probably many of you as a child on a console or personal computer played a shooting game with Apache helicopter. This car was at the height of its popularity in the 90s. The Gulf War drew incredible personal accounts from Army aviators of tanks and other armored vehicles of Saddam's army being hit, so it was all business. The Apache was and still is a formidable machine, with excellent avionics and a very impressive array of weapons. But the helicopter will soon celebrate half a century since its first flight, and there was no replacement for it. Clearly, drones have changed a lot of the functions of attack helicopters, but not everything. And this summer has shown that very well. The U.S. Army Air Corps needs a manned helicopter and even knows in what quantities. The Department of the Air Force has requested over 1,200 airframes from its executive managers for 2024. But what kind of helicopter it will be, no one has any idea yet. The Apache has a pretty powerful arsenal, but the generals say that's no longer enough for a modern helicopter. The fact is that for the fourth time the Air Ministry is putting a new attack and reconnaissance helicopter out to tender, spending huge sums of money on all these activities, and all ends up with nothing. And that's with the best of luck. First came the huge Comanche helicopter scandal, when over $8 billion taxpayer dollars were thrown down the drain for a helicopter that was never made. Then the whole of right America shifted that more money had been spent on each of the prototypes of a conventional helicopter than on a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. The optimists claimed that the effort spent would go into scientific and engineering research, but judging by further events, it went the wrong way. Then there were two more failed attempts, but at least they didn't pull that kind of appropriation out of the giant U.S. military budget. And then, like Hollywood, a remake was made with the Far-Allied Attack and Reconnaissance Helicopter program. It, as you may have guessed, was also shut down after spending only a couple billion. So, of the working attack helicopters, the U.S. is left with only the Apache, of which it has already squeezed out everything possible with a dozen modernizations. But here's the trouble. The honored American veteran has suddenly taken a tumble lately. Experts are sounding the alarm, and the political publication Zahil did a whole big investigative journalism piece on the subject. In March and February alone, 7 McDonnell Douglas AH-64 Apache helicopters crashed for technical reasons. In total, there have already been a dozen aviation incidents since the beginning of the year, and many aviation professionals fear that number will grow. The fatigue of the existing fleet is growing, new machines are not living up to expectations, and no replacement is in sight. And that, of course, begs the question. All right, well, God forbid it, the whole corruption thing. She always has been and always will be. But does this mean that the Americans have decided to completely abandon manned attack helicopters in the future? The question is certainly an interesting one. Also, the U.S. acknowledges the overall failure of the F-35 program despite the start of mass production. To find out almost in the third decade of the F-35's existence that it finally went into mass production when more than 1,000 units had already been produced, especially for allies, was a bit of a surprise. And all the blame for the strict military standards set by that America, which produced real masterpieces of technical thought. But in this technical framework, that is, the state, as they say, the state of full readiness for the fulfillment of missions, the F-35 did not fall in any way into this technical framework. And so it was sort of adopted for service, but due to the huge number of, let's say, discrepancies with the technical standards accepted in aviation, the beginning of serial production was postponed, making some individual batches. All this, of course, affected the combat fate of the airplane. In 12 years of direct service, the F-35 itself has taken fewer trophies than any other drone. The Israeli modification proved to have problems with air-to-surface operation. The American ones were afraid of getting under Russian radar all the time. The rest of us tried to fly less often, so as not to waste valuable resources. It was kind of scary, too. In December 2021, the Allied South Koreans wrote so-and-so to hail on the hill after another incident that their newest airplane, for all its net-centric capabilities, flies a little crooked. His excellent situational awareness, wonderful flight computers, and powerful RLS will not help if the Penguin starts doing one of his tricks again in a training flight. Such tricks, i.e. reasons for which a fatal aviation accident may occur, the Profile Commission counted exactly 10 in 2019, plus another 800 less dangerous ones. The most famous is, of course, flying at supersonic speed without afterburner. And that's where Lightning II comes out with a funny fork. It can either fly at supersonic speeds, losing stealth properties, or remain invisible, but then no accelerations and, God forbid, no maneuvers. And the very low profile of the airplane leaves a strange feeling. It has already been in the sights of RK fighters, including Russian ones, so many times that its basic data is hardly a secret to anyone. And just then, another revelation from Congressman came up that only 1.7 trillion was spent on the program. Lockheed Martin, the manufacturer of the fighter jet, appeared to have been looking for legal ways to circumvent the military's legal requirements all along. The major problems of the airplane were not corrected in the end, and representatives of the U.S. Chamber of Accounts, again having undertaken to find out what their precious stealth cost them, counted up to the fact that of the entire already created fleet of combat-ready aircraft is noticeably less than a third. As the chairwoman under the Congressional Committee on the F-35, Diane Maurer, stated to NBC, "We have the fact that our F-35 fleet can only perform 55% of its intended function, and only 27% of the F-35s are fully operational. This is 3 times less than the targets they are designed to fight. Is there no cheating of taxpayers in this? After all, it's roughly the same situation with the Allies.